Going live. You're live.
Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome to the shop. And Sarah is back with us today. All we can all rejoice and happiness. So yeah, we're not going to be building anything this week. I was thinking about a few different things, but realized I haven't done a Q&A in a while. Apparently the last time I did one was February. So it's time to do that. What's that?
Really? February?
Yep. Well, I did one right at the beginning of all the lockdown, but that was on the other channel actually. But I'm thinking next week, I'm actually going to restore these. And I bought some Purple Heart, and I thought it would be kind of fun to have clogs with a Purple Heart sole. So I'm thinking I'm actually going to do that. I might end up planing them down and gluing those on, and then during the live next week do all the shaping and the carving. So that'd be an interesting one. We'll see. So who knows what the future will hold. That means I'll be in tennis shoes next week because I can't wear them and work in them at the same time. That'll be freaky. But yeah, we don't have anything particularly coming up as there are no events and things of that nature. What is it? Maker Summer School. They reset theirs and are now going to be doing it in September, I believe it is. I'm probably wrong. But I'm probably going to be teaching out there now. So if you want to see that, look up Maker Summer School online and set up for that. Oh, sorry, forgot to switch your keyboard. But that's really the only thing on my my list right now. We're also waiting on the MWTCA national meet that's in October, I believe. And I might be doing a presentation of that. But we'll see how that all goes. So who knows what the future will hold. Have you been catching up with questions?
I think so. I think there's only one at the moment.
Cool. Well, if you have any questions, go ahead and throw them in there. If you can put like question or put some identifier at the beginning so it makes them easier to find, that makes it easier for my wife. Also, as the knife giveaway, if you watched the video, it came out on Saturday, making the marking knives, which are over there. If you want to win them, I'll be doing the draw on Saturday for them. And then I will be actually announcing the winners on the live next week on Tuesday. So stay tuned for that. I'm going to be giving away, it's 16 of them. So there's 16 knives that you could win from. 8 of them will be given away from comments. And then 8 of them will be given away to people who went to the link in the video description. So if you want to increase your odds, do both of them, and there's a better chance you'll actually get one. And so far, not that many people have entered. So pretty good chances, actually. Yeah, I think that's what we got. So what questions do we have to start with?
So far, from That Is What It Is, says, is it better to buy an old plane, restore it to working order, or buy a current generation from Wood River, Bench Dog, Taylor, Woolworks, or from others?
That is a very good question. It depends on you and your personality and your budget. When I got started, it was much better for me to get an old plane and restore it because I had zero money, and you can really get into it for dirt cheap if you start looking around. I bought my first plane for $5 and I spent a lot of time restoring it and reworking it and cleaning it up. But I got up and going for that. So yeah, you don't need to spend a lot when you're doing that. If you have the money and you'd rather spend your time just getting to work, then buying a new plane is the better one. But there are a lot of people out there who really enjoy that process of getting the tool and getting to know it by fixing it up and restoring it. The downside to that is you don't know what problems you're going to be getting into it. So you have to kind of look at your personality on that. As to new tool, which one should you get? I wouldn't get anything you can buy at the big box stores. You will hear people who say, yes, this one works great for me. Yeah, no, don't do it. You may get lucky and get a plane that actually works really well, but most of them end up being boat anchors. The bottom end ones, you can get them from Grizzly. I've heard mixed reviews on those. Some people say they're really good and some people say they're not, but you can't beat the price on them. They're like, $30, $40 a piece. Next step up from that would then be like the Tay Tools. He has some that are actually surprisingly good for the price they're on. The the Stanley Sweetheart, the new planes, those are kind of a mid-range. Then you get the Wood River, slightly better, but still in that kind of decent usable tools. But you're going to be spending, $100 a tool, so they're pricey. And then they go on up from that. So where are you in your budget-wise is the big question. What's next?
Let's see. Bryan Fulmer asks, kids' tools suggestions. I hear spoke shaves are a good start for little ones.
Yes, spoke shaves are a lot of fun. A flat bottom spoke shave. Don't get a rounded bottom spoke shave because a rounded bottom spoke shave takes a lot of work to do that. But you get like an old Stanley 151, and these are they're a lot of fun for the kids. They work really well. And the nice thing about this is they can start up and start doing shavings almost instantly and really, focus up. They can really get going to town. So you do the sharpening and you show them how they can move these in and out, and they can set it deeper and pull it back, and they get little shavings, they get big shavings, and they can kind of learn how that works. And then you can go against the grain and with the grain. It's easy to do. You're not putting much force on it, and so small hands can run this and can make a lot of shavings very quickly. And this can teach a lot about woodworking and how the wood reacts to different things. So that is a great way to do it. For teaching saws, usually I tell people, get a nice I.Sorby. There's a Dozuki. I can never remember. The two-edged. As you can tell, I'm not as much into Japanese tools. But these are actually really good for small hands and working on and just learning how to cut. They track easily, and they're not going to be spending a lot of time over controlling the saw. So those are very, very useful for small kids. Planing takes a lot of effort to learn, and you have to wait until they get a little bit bigger and they have some force to put behind it. But with a saw and a spoke shave, you can do some small things with that, and you do the planing along with them. They get to use the brace and bit and drill some holes. Then you can drive in pegs, and you actually do peg to joinery. Rather than making detailed joinery, it actually comes together really well. If you want to see a video I have one on making a bird feeder. Actually, I think I have two making bird feeders with the kids. I have one with my daughter making her toolbox, and those are all put together with peg joinery, and it's just simple tools that anyone can follow along. And if you want the plans, they're free on my website, so you can do that as well. So woodbywright.com/shop, and I have a whole bunch of plans on there that are completely free. What's next?
Dennis Meko asked, how do you prep boards from a chainsaw mill?
The same way I do from a rough saw mill. The only difference is that a chainsaw mill tends to be a little bit rougher than you get from rough sawn boards. So you got to spend more time scrubbing them, but it's done the exact same way. So get a decent scrub plane or turn a number 5 into a scrub plane and flatten them out with that, and then you take it from the scrub surface down into a smoother surface and then a flat surface, and just from there. So it's the exact same thing, just you spend more time because they're rougher. I hope that answered your question. What's next?
Nick Clickner has 2 questions. First one is recommendation for a good set of chisels to start for things like dovetails, etc. He has a cheap pair now, and then also, where do you recommend going to get old tools like planes?
When you're looking at the cheap ends of chisels, well, I just did a whole chisel test. So if you actually want to compare chisels in the handle size and steel quality and that type of thing, look at the chisel test video where I go into a deep dive on that. But when you're first getting into it, the steel really doesn't matter. You've got to be working with wood for a while before you can tell the difference between a decent steel and a great steel. It's just one of those things that you're going to run into issues up front that the steel really isn't going to be that big of a difference. So if you're looking for a cheap set of chisels, look for something that feels good in the hand. That's really the most important thing because that's what you connect to. That's what has that tactile feedback to it. So look for a cheap chisel that has a decent, comfortable handle. And then once you do that, you can get used to the chisel, and then you'll get to a point where I really want to spend some money and get a better chisel. Next step up in my book is usually the basic narex chisels. Those are relatively decent. They're not great steel, but they do work really well, and for the price, they really can't be beaten. Then the next step up from that, I have to go with my favorite, which is the narex Richter chisels. They came out the best in the tool show, and for the price, they're surprisingly affordable in comparison to a lot of the other ones. You get a lot of the really high-end chisels that are, $100 a piece. These are only about 30, 35, 40 for the bigger ones. And so price-wise, not bad, but still not like the $10 to $12 for the narex or the $1.50 for the cheap ones. So find out where you fall on that spectrum and then buy the best you can. What's next?
Let's see. Gordon McCall asked, do you have a source for the number 20 or number 12 through 20 tap and die for the threads on Stanley planes?
The threads on the quarter. Wait, can you read that again? Quarter 24.
Do you have any source for the number 12 through 20 tap and die for the threads on Stanley planes?
I think you're talking about the weird bolt threads, because the old Stanleys had quarter 24 threads. They're not, because normally we have quarter fine threads, which are 24, and we have quarter coarse threads, which are quarter 20. But Stanley had the quarter 24 threads, and those are almost impossible to find. But that being said, you can either make them if you have a thread cutting lathe, or you can buy a tap and die, which is I think what you're asking. In which case, I found one place on Amazon that was selling them, but I had to search for something really weird, and I'd have to go back and look for that. No, it wasn't on Amazon. It was some other place. I ended up searching for quarter 24 tap or quarter 24 die, and I ended up having to. I probably spent a good half hour looking for them online until I finally found a place that was selling a quarter 24 tap and die. But if you're looking for particular nuts and bolts, I would actually suggest, rather than making your own, go to handtoolfinder.com, and on there I have a list of all the online tool sellers. And if you just go down the list and say, hey, I'm looking for this bolt on this particular plane, there'll be several people there who have it. Or you can go onto one of the groups or forums that I have listed on there, and there'll be quite a few people there who have a pile of bolts out in their backyard, that in their back of the shop, that has what you're looking for. So I think that answered your question. If not, go ahead and answer again. What's next?
Let's see. Poor man. Oh, I actually have a question.
Hey, the poor man.
Cryogenic steel chisels, are they really worth the price tag, and are they any harder to hand sharpen?
Yeah, that was the whole tool video that I went with the narex Richter. And when I started the chisel test, I really thought it was kind of gimmicky, because steel is steel, and I'd been using my Aldi's chisels, which were relatively decent, but these surprised me so much that in the middle of the chisel test I changed mind and went and got these, because they're that good. Yes, and they cut well. The edges last forever in comparison to the other ones. They hold up really well for mortising. I've been very impressed on the quality of them. And as to sharpening, I really can't feel that much difference between sharpening these and sharpening my Aldi chisels. They're pretty similar. So they don't take that much more effort. Now, I do sharpen on diamond plates. If you're sharpening on natural stones, you're probably going to notice that they take a little bit longer. But I haven't done much on there to do comparison that way. So thanks for the question.
All right. Bryan Fulmer asked, where do you get those saws? And I think you're talking about the saws.
The Japanese saws. Actually, if you go to my website, woodbywright.com, actually there's a link down in the description down below where it goes to tools that I suggest. If you go to woodbywright.com, up in the top there is a thing that says tools. And there are, actually I just redid that yesterday, and put up a bunch more links on there of tools that I suggest. And I have the Japanese saws that I use, I have the chisels that I use on there, and I have a bunch of tools that I don't currently have, but I've used in the past. They're basically the tools that I would suggest if I get into it, because a lot of the tools I have are antiques, and I really can't suggest you go out and find an antique Stanley, because not everyone can do that. So I tried to have a list of all the new tools that I would suggest a replacement. And not looking at, the best, but looking at things that are, decent quality, maybe a little bit more expensive than the cheap stuff, but it's worth it in my opinion. So, yeah, if you have any questions about that, go over there. What's that?
Hang on just a second. Samuel Alexander Katz Peña. Hey, I don't have any money for tools, so I'm going to make my own. Thinking about a rabbet plane, router plane, and a grooving plane. Any suggestions and or tips? Thank you.
I just did a live video on the main channel a couple weeks ago, actually making a grooving plane from a block of firewood with an old chisel to a grooving plane in a matter of a couple hours. And once you can make one of those, you can adapt it to be any format you want. So if you want to make a rabbet plane, well, then you just don't have the groove on it. You make the blade a little wider, and there you've got a rabbet plane. Every one of them is it's a slight adaptation to the same formula, just changing the bed and picking a different chisel. So yeah, definitely take a look at that. When people are first getting into making their own planes, I just tell people right off the bat, don't expect the first one to be fantastic, but it's a learning curve. Be willing to jump into the next one. But once you've learned one of them, you'll see a few mistakes and things that you learn, and there's just little things that like, oh, this feels this way. You'll learn that, and the next one will be much better. And usually by the second one, you've got a really good functioning plane. It may not be the prettiest in the world, but it will function. So yeah, have fun with it, and don't be afraid to mess up, because that's one of the best ways to learn.
So we're going to diverge for just a short second, because Kuro was saying, by the way, the link to tool suggestion at the description is broken.
Is it?
So, FYI.
Yeah, if you go to woodbywright.com, up at the top, there's a tab for tools. I will have to look at that. Thank you.
Okay, back to a regularly scheduled program. Brad Spencer, what do you recommend for resawing rough cut lumber?
It depends on the size of the board. If it is 8 inches or less, I'm generally going to use my saw that isn't here. I have, my big hand saw. So I have a 5 PPI hand saw that I use, rip saw, and this is what I really like to do a lot of cross-cut work with. Not cross-cut, my resawing work with. If it's going to be larger than 8 inches, then I grab my Rubo style frame saw. That just is a little bit more comfortable for wider boards. When I first got into resawing, if it was larger than 2 inches, I grabbed that beast because that's a little bit more comfortable. I found it a little bit easier to control. But now that I've gotten a little bit more into hand tools, I'll usually just grab this. When I first got into it, I made a kerfing plane, which I have a video on making that. So you run a kerf around the board, helps hold the saw in place. And that works out relatively well, but I found it takes more time to make a kerf and then make the cut than just making the kerf. And once you get good at the saw and you learn the technique down and you get good body mechanic with it, you really don't need the kerf on there. So it's kind of one of those things that helps you in the beginning, kind of like training wheels, but may or may not be necessary. So it really depends on the width of the board. That 4 inches to 8 inch size, that's kind of the gray area between a hand saw and a Rubo style frame saw. So different people will draw that line in different places. So hope that answers your question.
Okay. 2 things. One, I don't know if it's just me, but it's like you're just ever so slightly out of focus.
Really? Well, let me see if I can fix that. What's next?
And then we got follow-up to Gordon McCall's question with the tap and dies. So the threads he was referring to are for the nut and rod for the handle. It's a number 12 screw with 20 threads per inch, and it's a Whitworth 70/32.
Okay, that's another one. Yeah, a lot of old planes have some really weird threads, and that's another one. In which case, yeah, finding the tap and dies for those is doing a really weird Google search, unless you have a thread cutting machine. And so, yeah, sorry, I really don't have a good source from that, other than if you're looking for that particular nut or bolt, go and find some of the old sellers, and they will have a pile of them in their back, and they're just looking for that particular bolt. And most of the time you'll find someone who has it. So usually I go down that list of online sellers on handtoolfinder.com, and I'll just email them and say, hey, I'm looking for this, I'm looking for this, I'm looking for this. And a couple of them will get back to me and say, yeah, I've got that over here. Or, hey, I know so-and-so has it. But no, I don't know of a specific site for those tap and dies, sorry.
All right, let's see. Pacific Coast Piper. My question is this: how should I go about building a hacking stock?
Ah, for throwing hatchets.
Yes, a hewing bench for axe work.
There are a lot of different designs for those, so it really depends on what you're looking for, but maybe I should make one of those sometime. That'd make a fun project. I really don't have any particular advice. Yeah, sorry. I tell you what, if you want specific advice on it, send me an email with a picture of exactly what you're looking for or the style you want, and I can kind of guide you through it, but it's mostly just like any other furniture. Break it apart into its component pieces and take it step by step. So what's next?
Respects wood. Is it worthwhile buying a vintage file, e.g. Nicholson, or will it probably be worn out from use?
When you get into files and rasps, most all of mine are antiques, and that's because the way I've bought most all of my files and rasps are I go to estate sales and other auctions, and you'll find, you go into an estate sale and you're looking through the house and you find there's a woodworker in the basement and he's got a couple old planes, and then there's like a bucket or a box of files, and there's 30 or 40 files in there, and they've all been rubbing against each other. I will buy that bucket of files for $5-10. I'll take it home and I'll pull out one or two that are still good in them, and I'll throw the rest away. I've done that probably a dozen times to get my collection of files. So that's what I've found to be one of the cheapest ways to do it, and a way to actually get a large selection of files fairly quickly. Depending upon what you're doing, the difference in files from a cheap file to a really good quality file are not that big for the beginner, but they are very big for someone who knows what they're feeling, someone who knows what they want, and they're looking for that specific vibration and the feeling they're trying to pick up good vibrations. Yes, I did do that. And that's where it really becomes important. Good quality files and poor quality files, there isn't a whole lot of wear difference in them. They will last a little bit longer with better quality steel and better tempering. But if you're just getting into it and you don't have a whole lot of money, buy the cheap ones. They will get the work done, and they will do it for you, and you will have a smile on your face. And then when you get into it a little bit later and you want to spend some money on something better, that's when you do it. But most of mine have been the antique ones where I just buy a bucket for pennies on the file and sort through them. I have thrown out and recycled probably well over 100 files that are worthless, that were worn out or were just a weird shape that I'd never used. But these are the ones that I have kept. What's next?
Let's see. cbryantbear. It's probably cbryantbear now that I read it correctly. How long did it take for you to prep your narex? I did buy the 1/2 and 3/4 per your suggestion.
I did not prep them at all. I just use them. Honestly, flattening the back on a chisel. If it's a cheap chisel, like the Aldis, the Craftsman, the big box stores, you're probably going to need to flatten them. These ones come dead flat, and it really depends on the plate you have. If you have diamond plates, every diamond plate is slightly different. Diamond plates are not dead flat, and there's slight changes to it. And so if you put it on one, and then you move it over to the next one, you'll get a different scratch pattern on it. And so it all depends on how flat is flat enough for you. And for me, they come more than flat enough that I did not need to touch them at all. So There are other people out there who will be far more picky than I will be, and they will spend hours and hours and hours flattening them and getting them just the way they want them. But that's not me. Hope that answers your question.
All right. James A. asks, what are your thoughts on using a number 5 as a jointer? I'm preparing to build my first workbench with restored hand tools, and I'm unable to find an affordable number 7 in my area.
Yeah, works great. I used a number 5 for quite a while before I got a number 7. The only thing you have to think about is if you're going to be jointing a board that is longer than about 30 inches, then the plane is not going to tell you it's flat. The plane will then ride over a variance of longer than 30 inches without much problem. And so in which case you need to have a straight edge or some other way to check flatness, and then you can joint with that. If you want to joint with a number 4 or number 3, you can joint with a number 4 or number 3. You just have to have something else that tells you it's flat, because the number 4 and number 3, they'll ride up and down the hills and valleys of that, and they won't tell you that it's flat. You just need a straight edge to check that it's flat. So hope that answers your question.
All right. J-Dub, regarding steel, can you... Okay, hang on. This isn't making sense. Can you... I'm wondering if it's can you describe or clarify? He skipped the verb. Can you blank the different methods of clarifying steel hardness? R59-63, etc. What the R and numbers mean.
They mean absolutely nothing.
Okay, and then is there like an A1, O1?
Yeah, there's different types of steel. You have O1 and A2 and PMV11, and the list goes on and on and on. And in all honesty, when you're looking at chisels, unless you've been working with chisels for a while, you are not going to tell the difference between one good tool steel and another. The big difference between them is the tempering, and that comes down to the company that's making them. What is their tolerance for their tempering? How much do they actually put into getting that exact temper? The temper in the tool will make a massive, massive difference in how well that steel performs. In which case, you're not going to be able to tell that by what type of steel it is or what hardness it came to. Those numbers mean almost nothing. The more important thing is how accurate is that particular company? How picky are they getting into what do they have for it? So usually I tell people, don't worry about O1, A2, PMV11. They're just numbers. And until you've been woodworking for a while. And once you've been woodworking for a while, then you can feel those slight differences in between doing different things. You kind of get to know how something is supposed to feel. And you'll be able to pick up something that's like, yeah, this is just dulling out a little bit faster than I think of, or it just feels a little bit different when I'm sharpening it. And you'll start to pick up on some of those slight differences, but for most people when they're getting into it, you won't be able to tell the difference. So, what's next?
Dan Young, do you have any tips for putting a tenon on a dowel peg?
Sure, just like any other one. I mean, basically, what I'm assuming you're doing is you're taking a round peg and you're cutting a square tenon on the end of it. In which case, it's just like cutting a tenon onto a rectangular piece. You're going to chop in the shoulders and then pare out the cheeks. And treat it just like another tenon, except for the lines you draw on the faces will be a little bit harder to see. And so those are usually what you end up doing is you end up paring off one cheek, and then you use that to measure and mark off the others to make sure that they're all at 90 degrees to what that first one was cut at. So hope that answered your question. If you have some specifics on that, feel free to send me an email, because that's a question that could go a lot of different ways depending upon what you mean by it. What's next?
Let's see. Samuel Alexander Katz Peña says, thank you for answering the prior question. What do you recommend getting first, a rip or a crosscut saw?
The first hand saw, or the first saw I get for most people, is a carcass saw. This is a crosscut saw. Now, if you go to Veritas, they will have a rip cut carcass saw, which is kind of confusing to people because a carcass saw has crosscut teeth. This is the saw I use more than any other in the shop. And one of these days, I'd actually like to get a little bit better one. This is a great beginner's saw, relatively affordable in comparison to others, but it just doesn't feel quite as good as what I'd like to have, and so I'd like to actually build a nice one in the future, but we'll see that. But yeah, this is the carcass saw, about 14 inches, 2 inches or so of plate, a relatively thin blade, small teeth. What is the PPI in this? 14? Yeah, 14 PPI. A carcass saw will treat you well. But yeah, most of the time I would tell people to get a cross cut rather than a rip cut, because it is easier to rip with a cross cut than it is to cross cut with a rip saw. So it's slightly more versatile to get a cross cut, though you will find people who will argue the other way. What's next?
Let's see. Jim K. Train 0. 3 questions. 1. Why are dovetail planes apparently not very common in the antique sellers?
Because they're not very common to begin with. Most people just didn't use them.
Number 2. Is there anything tricky in making one?
Nope, I have a couple videos on doing that. It's just like any other molding plane. Just spend a little bit of time on it and have fun.
And 3. Any tips on removing an embedded nail in reclaimed lumber?
Brute force and violent manipulation. The trick is finding the nail without using your precious tools. That's the worst way to find them. But yeah, every nail is a little bit different. But most of the time you're going to end up damaging the wood around it. If it's embedded and there's no head in it, it's usually, in my case, it's going to be a needle nose pliers or drilling it out of one way or another. Yeah, no fun. Yeah, it's really fun when you come across a bullet inside, because those actually plane really well. And I know quite a few people who will leave the bullet in the wood because you can still plane the lead and then seal over. It's kind of a nice little addition. What's next?
Hang on. Patience is a virtue. All right. Tyler von Eiderstein. Source for a similar low TPI resawing saw like the one you just held up. So this was
handtoolfinder.com. I have a list of all the online sellers that I trust, as well as all of the known places I have for buying antique tools. Getting these antique is going to be a lot cheaper and a lot easier. I have found a couple that I trust that are newer. There are some of these you can get that are crazy expensive. They get up to $300-400. I think Bad Axe Saw now has one, but the cheapest one that I found that is still decently usable is right there, and I can't remember it. I have a link to it on my tools list on my page, woodbywright.com/tools. No, tool suggestions. Go to woodbywright.com and click on tools. It's under saws. I can't remember the name of it. That's going to bug me now. Oh well, it's on there. But there really aren't a lot of good sources for it. So it's one of those things you either spend a lot of money or you get an antique, or you buy one that's relatively decent, but not, still a decent amount of money. What's next?
Jack wants to know what makes a better smoother, number 3 or number 4? Looking at setting up a smoothing plane.
Depends on what you want. It's a completely personal preference and makes absolutely no difference. Some people say a number 4, some people say a 4.5, some people say a 3, some people swear by the 2. Basically, the smaller the sole is, the more it's going to ride with the undulations of the curve, and so you can just focus on one spot and smooth out one area where you might have some tear out or something of that nature. That's what makes a smoothing plane as opposed to a jointing plane with a larger surface. The jointing plane will flatten the board out. The smoothing plane will detail spots and smooth out little bits. So it just depends on what you want. For me, I like the number 4. It's generally a good size, but there are some times when I jump to a number 3 where I want to detail something a little bit easier or something smaller. But most of the time for me, it's a 4. What's next?
Let's see. Respects Wood asked, how do modern hex-shank auger bits compare to the vintage ones?
I'm guessing you're talking about the wood owl and things like that. Honestly, as long as they have a spur, as long as they have a spur to cut the wood, and you're not talking about like a spade bit, they generally do relatively well. The most important thing on it is the snail, that screw at the middle that pulls it through the wood. If that has the wrong pitch for the wood you're working on, you're going to have problems. It's either going to want to go too fast and it's going to strip out on you, or it's going to go too slow and you're cranking and cranking and cranking and cranking and not doing anything. And so it's the same problem, one for the other. Now, most of the new augers have one spur and one cutting blade, but they still have an aggressive thread. And so what that means is that you're putting a lot more force into it. They're designed to be run by a drill. And you can do those in a brace and bit, but they take a lot more force and you end up wearing your arm out. The Wood Owl makes a 3-spur auger bit that I really like. And there's a couple other companies that make them as well. And those will actually, those would go really, really well. And I'm toying with the idea of replacing my set with those. Because I like them. They're just not the antique way to do it. So hope that answers your question.
Okay, I'm going to jump ahead to this question that just came up because I can't remember what you said earlier. So Michael C. says, good evening, Sarah and James. Just jumped on. Did I miss the marking knife giveaway? And if not, when should I mark the date?
Nope. The drawing will happen on Sunday. And I will be doing the live next week, and I'll actually be announcing the winners then. I'll contact the winners before that. But I'll be announcing it at that time. So stay tuned for next week.
Wait, you're drawing them Sunday, but you're making them wait till Tuesday to find out?
No, I'm drawing them Sunday, and I will contact people on Sunday. But then I'll announce it to everyone on the live, rather than making a whole video just to announce it.
Well, what's the fun in that?
Because no one likes a video where I announce winners and no one else wins. Only 12 people are happy with the video and everyone else hates it. Actually, 16 people are happy, which is actually quite a few people, but 16 thumbs up and 43,000 thumbs down is not happy. What's next?
Let's see. Volliner's Workshop asked, have you messed with the PAX or Crown saws? Looking for a decent big tooth rip saw, but with eBay prices, I'm wondering if it'd be better to go get a PAX and save the hassle of recut teeth.
Yes, both of those work very well. They're not the best saw in the world. Most people are going to want to modify the handle so it's a little bit more comfortable because they tend to be just a simple routed handle. But the saw itself works really well, and so it's they're decent. They're not amazing saws. I mean, like this is an Atkins that I love. And the handle on this is just beautifully fit. And the radius of the grip changes from here to here and up to here. And so you get this hand-shaped grip that feels perfect in the hand. And it's amazing what the difference that does. And this is one of the things where I start getting into the feel of hand tools. Because if you have a grip that feels right in your hand, it just makes everything else run a little bit smoother. And it makes the whole experience feel that much better. If something isn't quite right, then your hand does something slightly funny and your elbow does something slightly funny, and now your sawing is going like this, and getting a saw that feels good in the hand is surprisingly one of the most important things about a saw. Just the way it is. Even though the hand doesn't do any cutting, it's kind of like a chisel. One of the most important things is how does it feel in your hand? What's next?
Let's see. Bill K. Do you have an opinion on Wood River hand planes that you care to share? Thank you.
Yeah, they're good for the price. They're not the best in the market, but for the price, they're relatively decent. Most of the time they're going to take a little bit of tweaking here and there, but once they're set up and you use them, they will last you a lifetime or two. They're good planes. That being said, there will always be people who are like, yeah, I got one that just didn't come out right. Yeah, that's part of the manufacturing process. You spend more, you get a better quality control on it. So, I mean, you get what you pay for, but those are still good, functional, usable tools that will last you a long time.
So Kenny-Anjanette Horn asked, what type of files are essential for the new woodworker? Top 3 or 5?
Honestly, getting a 4 in hand. And this is probably the most used file and rasp in my shop. A 4 in hand is, you can do 90% of everything you need to do with this thing. Let me focus in here. There you go. And so what this has is a flat side here with a rasp over here and file over here. And you flip it over and this is a rounded surface with the file and the rasp. The nice thing about this is I can use this side here and I'll be doing the rasp rough work, and then I just rotate it around and I can have the exact same surface and I can do the finer file on this. And so this will allow me to hog off a lot of material and then very quickly switch around and detail it down and get this actually gets pretty close to a finished surface. Then I can come in with a really small file and clean it up. But a 4 in hand is a fantastic tool to have. And this is one of these tools where, you know, I could sell you a really good one that costs a lot of money, but the cheap ones are just as good. Yeah, you can get picky and choose one or another, but the one I have listed on my site is like $12. And honestly, if you go to the big box store and you buy one, you're probably going to be just as happy. It's a hunk of steel with spikes in it. So yeah, getting one of these will do most everything you want to do. After that, then you're going to want to buy a file for the work you want to do. So is there a shape you want to do? Do you need something bigger? Do you need something more aggressive? Do you need something that's finer? You're going to need a specific file for that particular job you're intending to do. So get one of these. This will do most of what you need to do. And then after that, buy the tool you need to complete the project. What's next?
Hey guys, sorry.
What do we got? About 15 minutes left. So
Yeah, I know.
we'll see if we can get
Sarah's
to them all.
wilting. Let's see. Rushton Paul asked, I recently acquired a vintage, I don't know if it's a vintage I.Sorby, vintage I.Sorby 1.5-inch bevel chisel, and I was surprised by the huge diameter of the handle. What do you think about resizing this original handle to something more manageable?
It's yours. Do whatever you want to it. Yeah. That's one of the things that, you know, the planes that I have torn down completely and restored, I paint them blue. And so all of these blue planes are actually Stanley's, but they're my planes. And I'm going to be using them for years and years and years to come. So I don't care what other people want. I don't care about their resale value. It's my tool. I'm going to do what I want and I'm going to make it my tool. And so, you know, it's yours. Have whatever you want. If you find something that makes it more comfortable, change it up. I've got quite a few saws where I've modified the handle. I have a couple where I've made a divot where the index finger goes and shaped them to be something that fits me and what I like. So yeah, go for it. My wife's falling asleep over there.
You know what?
She deserves it.
Be nice.
She's been working like crazy lately.
I was doing better than last week. I'm here.
Yes. Last week she barely made it home.
That's not far from the truth. All right, let's see. Bryan Fulmer, can you make a flat straight edge? If so, what would you use to make a long straight edge without a longer straight edge?
Yep.
Wow, I'm glad that made sense to you.
Actually, I made this one. Oh, I really can't remember how long ago it was. Probably about 4 years ago, and I did a video on it. So if you look up Wood by Wright straight edge, this one should come up. And one of the interesting things about it is if you eyeball a board, you can see if it's straight. And you can generally tell with intolerance if it is straight or not. And this one has actually changed a little bit over time. And with wood, that happens. So I'm probably high right here, 1/1000th or so. Yeah, something like that. Just a spot right around here where I'm just a hair high. And so I could come in and clean that up. And that's one of those things that you can spot when you have a nice edge to look along. You can do that. The other way you can do it, and probably the more accurate way until you get good at eyeing something down, is you can put it down on a surface and draw a line. And then rotate it around, put it back on that line, and see where it lines up. Because if it's out of undulation, then it will go past itself. Now the problem with that is if I rotate it this way, then there's a possibility that there's an S-curve in here that's matching exactly. So it comes up at this point, at the exact point it comes down over here. And so I want to be careful of that. So what I can do is I can rotate it this way, and then I can rotate it this way, and I can check both lines against each other and make sure that the lines line up with each other. And so if I rotate it both directions, that line should be perfectly straight with both edges of this. And that way I can tell that it's straight. But for most of the time when I'm working with this, because wood moves over time, I'm just going to eyeball it. And be like, yep, right about there. I got a little bit I got to take off. But for 99% of straight edge work, that's far better than it needs to be. But if you do the straight edge on a line, that will tell you exactly where it's out. What's next?
All right. I don't know that we're going to get to any new questions.
Sorry, if we get a super chat, we will jump to that. But otherwise, if we don't make to them all, we won't make to them all.
Send James an email. Let's see. Clockman45. How much do you know about Taylor hand planes?
I think you're talking about Tools. He has started actually doing a bunch. And yes, I have gotten my hand on a couple of them, and I like them. I honestly don't know how he does them for the price he does. They're good quality. One of the things that I really don't like about the new Stanleys, like my low angle here, is the lever cap are aluminum. The handles just don't feel very good, and there's just a few fit and finish things on these that aren't great. Still a functional plane, but things that I don't like so much. But the ones from Tools I've actually been really impressed with. The fit and finish on them is a lot better than the ones I've seen from other places, especially anywhere near that price range. So yeah, I've actually started suggesting them on my website because I like them. And I've thought about actually getting a couple of them and putting them up here to have as regular users. So we'll see how that goes in the future. But yeah, hope that answered your question. Sorry. I love that quiet keyboard.
S for cheap. What's the best way to fix a cap iron with a bent edge?
Bend it back. Cap iron or a chip breaker, they are a very soft metal. They're very malleable, very bendable. And so usually I'll put it on a flat steel surface and tap it back with a hammer or a peen surface to shape it around. Also, I'll take them over to my diamond plate, and I will use that to basically file the front edge flat. So if it's curved or chipped out, you can actually basically sharpen it. I mean, I have a whole video on that. If you look up Wood by Wright, chip breaker fitting or chip breaker problems, I think I have 2 videos on that actually, where I actually go into showing how to fit a chip breaker to the iron. And I show the method of using it on a plate. But they're very bendable metal, so feel free to bang on them, file on them, and you can reshape them very easily. Is that a super chat?
It is a super chat.
Thank you, Greg. You're going to get a mother's mom joke here in a bit.
Oh, I thought you were going to say a Mother's Day present. I did a nap and homemade lasagna. Let's see.
What's his question?
Greg says, I have a bunch of Japanese saws. Looking to get a Western saw. If I had to get one Western saw, carcass or tenon, which one should I get? Oh, wait. Hang on. Let me finish the question before I emphasize things. If I had to get one Western saw, carcass or tenon, which one should I get? Crosscut or rip? Thank you for all your awesome content.
Carcass saw, 100% carcass saw. It is the most used saw in my shop. And a carcass saw is a crosscut saw. Though if you buy them for Veritas, they do sell them as a rip cut carcass saw, which is really confusing. But yes, crosscut carcass saw, about 14 inches long length, about 14 ppi. That's the go-to saw that I use for so much. I get all of this lumber over here that I've rough milled up, and I've been using this and my buck saw, and I just cut it to length and width, got it roughly there. Most all the other sawing is going to be done with this. I'll use this for cutting all of my shoulders, cutting these all to length and doing the detail cuts on it, that's this. Then probably 15 to 20% of my other saw cuts will be done with my tenon saw, and then maybe 2 to 5% will be done with my dovetail saw. But yes, the carcass saw is the way to go. It is a very, very versatile saw that works out phenomenally well. If you're worried about the carcass saw not getting down far enough, then you can get a larger sash saw. And some people really like that a little bit more than a carcass saw. But for me, I like the control and the size of the carcass saw. So yes, that is what I suggest. So thanks for the super chat. Here comes the mom joke. She's smiling. This is going to be a good one.
I'm not sure. This might be a groaner. I might go for it. Why is dark spelled with a K and not a C?
Why?
Because you can't see in the dark. But it's...
I love you.
I know.
What's next?
I don't know. Edward Leonard asked, you might make your own router planes and might like them beyond anything else, but if I had to choose between a Lie-Nielsen or a Veritas, which one would you recommend? And then open or closed?
Yeah, actually, I have made 6 or 7 router planes over the years, and I still use my Stanley that I get. They work great, but I just like the metal one better. As to Veritas or Lie-Nielsen, they're two sides of the same coin. They will both function just as well. They will both do just as good quality. As to their function and their usability, they are identical. Their quality, they're both great tools. It really comes down to a personal preference. Lie-Nielsen is really into keeping the traditional style, keeping this traditional function. And so they make planes that look a lot like they used to look. They make planes that have slight tweaks and differences, but they feel the same, they look the same, and it's that antique feel from a new tool. Whereas Lee Valley or Veritas, they do a lot more tweaking, and they take things back to the drawing board and they say, okay, how can we do this better? How can we make this more functional in one way or the other? What are other features and bells and whistles we can put into it? So it really depends on which one of those two camps you fall into. For me personally, I prefer the Veritas. It just has a little bit better feel to it, and there's a couple little features that just make it a little bit more functional. But really, it's a personal preference in the end. So, I mean, do you like the idea of someone rethinking something and making it new, or do you want something that's that tried and true traditional style? That's really the big difference between the two. What's next?
I don't know. Bill Tiffin asks, what do you think of Rob Cosman's saws?
I honestly have never used one of his saws. I would like to someday, but I haven't had the chance to try it. Everything I've heard about them is they're great saws. There's a few little things and tweaks that he makes on them that make them a little bit better than in one way or another, but yeah, I haven't had the chance to actually have the personal touch to them. So sorry about that. But as to good usable tools, from the people I've heard and trusted, yes, they are great, good usable tools. So hope that answers your question. But I'd love to give you more. One of these days I'll get a chance to play with one, but not yet. What is next?
James A. asked, between hickory, walnut, and silver maple, what would be the best for making a router plane?
Hickory, walnut, silver maple. Any of those would make a great router plane. There really isn't a best. Each of them have their pros and cons. Walnut looks great. Walnut is an easy wood to work with. It'll dent a little bit faster. It probably won't stand up as much to abuse. Hickory will stand up to an incredible amount of abuse. It will last for a long, long time, but it is a pain to work with. It is incredibly stringy and will cause you frustrations. Silver maple, a little bit harder than the walnut. Great wood to work with, so kind of halfway between the two. Whatever you like. really all three of them would make a great wood for it. So yeah. We only have a couple time left for a couple more questions. So if we didn't get to your question, I'm sorry. Unless you throw up a super chat, then we'll get to that. But what's next?
You ready?
Yep.
Let's see. Brad's Workbench. What's the deal with infill planes? Why so expensive, and are they worth trying?
Infill planes are so expensive because they are incredibly difficult to make. They are not something that you can manufacture. You have to make the wood fit dead on precise to the metal. And so if there's any slight change in the metal body, you have to adjust the wood to make that fit. The nice thing about them is that there is no vibration in them. There is no shaking to them. They are the most smooth and buttery tools you've ever used. They feel fantastic. But the reason for the price is for the work that goes into them. They really take a lot of time and effort to make right. And they've kind of become collectible because there aren't that many of them, and they're still good, usable, functional tools. So they're harder to find, and they're more coveted because they did have a lot more work going to them, and they were a lot more time intensive to create. So that's really the big thing. Actual functionality between them, no. Hand feel, oh yeah. Infill planes are like, whoa, yeah. But it's really what you're paying for. What's next?
I'm sorry. Let's see. James Carey asked, which plane is your favorite?
Oh, that's easy.
And then, did you have a lot of trouble getting it?
This is actually the Veritas Custom plane, number 4 size. It is a new plane, and it is by far my favorite. It's one of the things I like about Veritas is they've kind of redesigned the plane. And there's so many things on this that are newer, bigger, better, well thought through, so many bells and whistles that this is a phenomenal plane. Now, it is incredibly expensive, and you look these up and they get, whew, yeah. So that's the reason I only have one of them. I don't have the number 5, and I don't have the number 7, and I don't, yeah. One of these days I might spend the money and get another one, but it's by far my favorite. Next up is probably my 4.5, just because I like the feeling of the 4.5. I like the feeling of the 3. I probably use the 5 more than anything else, but every plane is a little bit different on there. But yeah, if I had to pick one plane to be my go-to plane for everything, it would be the Veritas Custom number 4. But that's a very personal question, so sorry about that. What's next?
Well, they asked.
One more question?
Okay, so Sam Alexander Katz Peña says, me again, I have a hard time chopping mortises. Should I buy better chisels or tenon chisels? Any other recommendations for chop mortises?
Arthur, I can't hear Mommy. Go on out. We'll be out in a bit. What's that? Sorry?
Okay, hang on. He asked, I have a hard time chopping mortises. Should I buy better chisels or tenon chisels, or do you have any other recommendations for chopping mortises?
If you're having problems chopping a mortise, most of the time it's technique, not chisel. And there are a bunch of different ways to do it, and some of them are very useful and some of them are not. And so if you really want to see, I have a bunch of videos on how to cut a mortise. If you're just using regular chisels, there really isn't that much to them, and most chisels are going to be about the same. If you go over to Paul Seller's video, he has several really, really good videos on chopping chisels. He has one where he does it against glass. You can actually see it working inside the mortise. And so definitely worth taking a look at his stuff on there. But most of the time when people are having difficulty chopping mortises, it comes down to the function of it. Mortising chisels feel good, but they don't make the work that much better. Some people swear by them being a little bit faster because you can really pound on them and whale them down in. But yeah, I don't know. I don't use them that much because when I have a mortise that's big enough, then I'm probably going to drill it out and then chop out the waste. But if it's a smaller mortise, then I'm just going to grab my my bench chisels and chop it out. So, hope that answers your question. If not, send me an email with pictures, and I'll take a look at what you got and see what problems you have. So, What?
Steve Combs is trying to get you in trouble.
What?
Quick question. Well, otherwise he wrote thick question. Which is your favorite child?
Who's my favorite child? Well, it's Melody because she's the one obeying me right now. Oh.
JJ's always the best at sleeping through the night.
No, they each have their own favorite things. Arthur is good at math. JJ's good at sports. Melody's good at dancing.
I'm also good at fighting.
Yes, you are.
That's his main thing.
Okay, whoa.
Okay, guys.
Okay, you got it.
So, thanks for the super chat, Steve.
Circulation.
Anything on Nintendo else I can play?
No, it's time for bed.
I'm a stay-at-home dad, so I deal with this every day. I can't get work done.
No
What?
complaining.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a mom joke for him?
Oh, hang on.
Oh, here we go.
I got
So while you're doing that, we're going to be announcing the winners of the tool giveaway on the next live, so stay tuned for that. And next time, I'm probably going to be working on my clogs, though I'm not quite sure, so we'll see how that goes.
I like this.
So let's end this with mom joke.
What do you call a small mother?
What do I call a small mother? Sarah?
Aha. A minimum. A minimum.
Minimum. That makes more sense across the pond.
See, if Alan was on, he would have just said Sarah too. But anyways.
Cool. Well, thank you everyone for watching. This has been fun. And until next time, have a wonderful day.
Poor kid's going to need therapy. We already knew that. Alrighty.
I'm still holding. I'm holding.
What? All right.